Hello and welcome back to another document deep dive. This time we are actually revisiting the previous video, because after I released that, our researcher Radiosmersh actually surfaced some new documents, this time from the Russian side, that allow us to look at the same battle from the opposing side, at least to a degree. So that's quite interesting. These documents are all transcribed and found on a Russian blog, which I will link to in the description of this if you want to check them out in the original form. So just to reiterate what happened during that battle that we looked at last time, this is the German map here, and it was all about this little outpost here at Pustynja, which the Germans had in front of their main line, which ran along this axis here. And the Russians on the 21st to 23rd of November 1942 managed to first destroy it with artillery and then overrun it with tanks and infantry, and so the Germans were pushed back to their normal line here. So yeah, let's look at some of the Russian documentation here. First of all, let's look at some pictures. The Russians often included these types of drawings in their report, which is a panoramic view of the actual village of Pustynja, or what was left of it. As you can see, it seems like even at this point, much of the village was destroyed, and there were only these mounds of snow over the rubble left. You can see there are some walls, and these seem to be maybe in part German wire obstacles, but also maybe civilian fencing to a degree. This seems to be a destroyed hut. So yeah, this is probably what it looked like to a degree from the Russian perspective. And it seems like some of these mounds might also have been German positions. But yeah, I've seen better ones than this, to be honest, like the one that I had for Pustynja, for Operation Mars, that Radiosmersh also turned up, was a bit better. But yeah, still quite interesting. This is a Russian intelligence report on this position and where the Germans had their trenches and firing points. So some of them seem to have been in single buildings that were probably fortified, and then you can see connecting trenches here. Now, the Germans mentioned that due to the swampy terrain, these trenches were mostly 50 centimeters deep, so you had to crawl through them between the different firing points. So that's something to keep in mind here. But still, this would be interesting if one were to make a map about it. You could make some pretty detailed recreations. And sometimes that's something that I often like, is to see trenches that go through destroyed buildings or through farms and garden areas. I did that a lot on Operation Mars. That stuff is fun to map and fun to play in as well. Apparently there was a little chapel or church in this village as well, by the way. This is the last map that we found, which shows, I think this is actually already after the village here was taken, and it shows actually after 5.0, the point 5.0 was taken as well. And it shows here the German last stand at the Witch's Cauldron, which apparently here has been taken and the road cut. We talked about that. And so this is the main stand at hill 80.8 or point 80.8, as well as the Sava height, or whatever they called it, which was here in the north. And these are probably the tank attacks that led to the demise of that last German position. So yeah, quite interesting. Apparently they were really quite encircled here. But as we know from the German AAR, they were able to manage to get back at least one company, or what was left of it, with all their wounded from here. So due to the forested terrain, it wasn't entirely easy to pin the Germans down here. It also shows that the German front line here was fairly solid at this point, and the Germans did mention that they managed to destroy one T-34 from this position here. Now I will read the translated version of the Russian AAR. Sadly, I can't read that in Russian myself, especially if it's handwritten. And here is what they say about the 21st of November, so the actual battle. 202nd Rifle Division, holding the right flank with the forces of the 1317th Rifle Regiment, the Marine Battalion, the 253rd Rifle Regiment, and the 2nd Battalion 645th Rifle Regiment, ready to launch an offensive on Pustynja. The units were replenished with ammunition and provisions. It's interesting, so there were several different infantry units used here. They don't mention the tank unit, although I think we have some info on that as well. The order was received from the headquarters. The attack was to begin at 1300 on the 21st of November. Now, this is actually interesting because according to the Germans, it happened a lot earlier. Now, part of that might actually be because the Germans were often still on German time in their AARs and in their planning. So this is something to keep in mind. It might not actually have been, like the times might not be completely synced up here. The units moved to their starting positions, maintaining camouflage and stealth during their approach. 6 a.m. the units occupied their starting positions. A 2nd Battalion, 1317th Rifle Regiment, 200 meters south and southeast of Pustynja. Marine Battalion of the 253rd Rifle Regiment, 300 meters to the west of Pustynja. And the 1st Battalion, 1317th Rifle Regiment, 300 meters northwest of Pustynja. 2nd Battalion, 645th Rifle Regiment, 200 meters southeast. High with elevation 80.8. Not 100% sure what that means, but this does kind of sync up with many of these arrows that we see on the German operation map. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it also goes on to say that the division artillery and attached artillery are in firing positions ready to fire. At 9 a.m., according to the Russian report. The German report says this was earlier, so this might be due to that time issue. At 9 a.m., artillery began destroying firing points in the Pustynja area, elevation 5.0 and elevation 80.8. Until 12:55, artillery continues to fire to destroy enemy artillery, and mine batteries, mortar batteries probably, are conducting heavy fire on battle formations, feeling out our firing positions. So this might actually be that German defensive strike that is mentioned in their report. And it also says here they are awaiting the attack signal, and at 12:55 M20 salvo on the Pustynja area, that's the rocket artillery that the Germans also mentioned at the crescendo of the artillery fire. A series of 3 NP rockets from the 1317th Rifle Regiment commander, the attack begins. So these are probably flares that he fired to signal. 1300 infantry with 6 tanks attacked Pustynja. So 6 tanks apparently, according to the Russians, are involved. The Germans, I think, if I remember correctly, mentioned 2 knocked out. At 1310, individual dug-in enemy machine gunners conduct heavy automatic gunfire. The units, overcoming the enemy's stubborn resistance, reach the line of trenches, break into them, and conduct hand-to-hand combat. The enemy, unable to withstand the onslaught of our units, retreats in panic in the direction of road mark 5.0, over here, leaving up to 460 corpses of soldiers and officers on the battlefield. Our units pursue the enemy. If I remember correctly, I would have to rewatch the other video, but this might be a bit inflated in terms of enemy dead here. I think the Germans had fewer casualties according to their own records. Now there's a diary here from Captain I.P. Savchenko, who was involved. November 21st, 1942. The artillery offensive began at 9 o'clock. At 13:10, they launched a powerful artillery barrage using M30 and M13, so these are Katyushas. The ground began to rumble. After a while, they launched a barrage, followed by the infantry. The Germans offered almost no fire resistance. This is different from the report to a degree. There were only battles in dugouts with a pitiful remnants of a full-fledged battalion. 460 people and 60 machine guns were covered in Pustynja. 13 people, soldiers who did not look like people. That's what survived. Naked, barefoot, even without caps, they danced in the snow in front of our Red Army soldiers. So the village of Pustynja was taken almost without losses, which sounds a bit different from the actual report here, but that's what he wrote in his diary. It does line up a bit, though, with the German one, because they claimed that the artillery barrage basically neutralized their position. Back to the report. 1400, our advancing units, having reached the line of road mark 5.0, encountered heavy rifle machine gun and mortar fire from a strong point on an unnamed height, 200 meter east of road mark 5.0. The units lay down and are engaged in combat with the enemy. The subsequent attack by our units was unsuccessful. The units took up positions. 2nd Battalion, 1317th Rifle Regiments, 200 meters south, road elevation 5.0. Battalion, 126th Rifle Brigade, takes up defensive positions on an unnamed height northeast, and then it for some reason says desert. That must be some kind of translation glitch here. Regarding the tanks, they were from 60th Tank Brigade, and they note in their war diary losses in material. Direct hits from shells damaged the mantles of 2 T-34 tanks and disabled the guns. A 3rd tank received 2 direct hits to the turret, as a result of which the screws securing the turret ring were torn off. The radio station of 1 T-34 tank was disabled. So yeah, it seems like while the Germans claimed these as completely destroyed, basically they might have been able to repair them without much problem. So for the next day, it says 202nd Rifle Division, holding its right flank, is preparing for a further offensive. The units are putting themselves in order, bringing up fire weapons, having partially regrouped at 1100, attacked the enemy strongpoint 200 meter east of the road, elevation 5.0, and captured it. The enemy, driven out of the strongpoint, retreats in disarray to the height with elevation 80.8. Our units pursue it. Having reached the line 200 meters southwest, west and northwest of the height with elevation 80.8, the units encountered strong enemy fire resistance from a fortified point with a height of 80.8. So yeah, that's that last stand that I mentioned that the Germans also talk about. While waging a firefight and having no success in the subsequent attack, the units lay down and took up positions, and then it names the positions again. Yeah. In the end, it says the units are putting themselves in order and have the further task of capturing the height of 80.8. That's what the Germans mentioned. They held on to that, even though they were basically encircled there. And then for the last day, it says 202nd Rifle Division, that's the 23rd now, of course, continuing to firmly hold its right flank, was preparing for a further offensive. Units were being put in order. By 8 a.m., it had partially regrouped its forces. Battalion 253rd of the Rifle Division, after a battle at road mark 5.0, was withdrawn to the Sarajevo area, 1.5 kilometers southeast of the desert. Again, that word. I don't know exactly what they mean there. Maybe the swamp, where personnel were being put in order. So apparently maybe another unit attacked 80.8 in the end. It goes on. At 1600, after a 2-hour artillery barrage, overcoming strong fire resistance with 4 tanks, attacked the enemy stronghold at the height of 80.8 and captured it. The enemy, unable to withstand the onslaught of our units, retreated in panic in the direction of Sabrutno, leaving on the battlefield up to 200 corpses of soldiers and officers, 2 75mm guns and 1 105mm, 4 37mm guns, 4 50mm mortars, 3 tanks, 15 LMGs and 1 HMG, 15 SMGs, 1,500 shells and up to 30,000 bullets and other weapons. For Pustynja itself, 15 POWs, up to 150 rifles, dozens of LMGs and SMGs, tens of thousands of rounds, etc., etc. Now, what's interesting here, they claimed 3 enemy tanks knocked out. According to the German records, they lost 1. They also didn't mention losing a 105mm gun. It is possible that this includes guns in the position here that the Russians thought they had silenced and knocked out, but maybe didn't necessarily really hit. Now, one last thing I want to mention, a bit of a more funny thing here actually, is that Radiosmersh also found an earlier report, because the Russians did actually attack Pustynja earlier as well, even with a degree of tank support, but this didn't go well, and there is a passage here from a tank brigade commander, I should say. The tank of Tolokonnikov was blown up by a landmine, while the tanks of Lebedev, Petrulin and Kartoshin got stuck after leaving the minefield and supported the infantry's advance with stationary fire. The tank of Lieutenant Gabichev, which came to assist, also got stuck. When I reported to Major Prokopenko and Colonel Dakovsky that the tanks were stuck in the minefield and couldn't move further, they refused to listen, insisting that there couldn't possibly be a minefield since the infantry had passed through without blowing up. So yeah, there was apparently some real geniuses in charge here at times. Yeah. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this little addendum video. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.